I've always been the kind of person who finds comfort in isolation. After my divorce, I started hiking more than ever, sometimes for days at a time. Just me and the wild. Last September, I set out for a solo trek in the Black Pine Wilderness, a stretch of forest in northern Idaho that barely shows up on most maps. I'd read about it on a forum for off-the-grid hikers, the kind of place where you can walk for hours and never see another soul. I left my car at the end of a rutted dirt road, miles from the nearest town. The air was cold and sharp, the kind that makes your breath hang in front of you even in the afternoon. I checked my pack, made sure my GPS was working, and set out on a narrow game trail that wound through the pines. No cell service, no marked paths, just the way I liked it. The first few hours were perfect. The forest was alive with the sound of wind in the branches and the distant call of a raven. I was aiming for a ridge about 6 miles in, where I'd camp for the night and watch the sun set over the valley. I kept a steady pace, stopping only to drink from my canteen and check my bearings. About 3 miles in, the trail started to climb. The trees grew thicker, the light dimmer. I noticed the silence first. The birdsong faded, replaced by the soft crunch of my boots on the forest floor. It was the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're being watched, even when you know you're alone. I pushed on, telling myself it was just nerves. But the feeling didn't go away. Every so often, I'd catch a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye, a branch swaying, a shadow slipping between the trees. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the trail ahead. By late afternoon, the sky had turned gray, and a light rain began to fall. I pulled up my hood and kept moving, but the trail was getting harder to follow. The ground was slick, and the undergrowth was thick with ferns and fallen branches. I checked my GPS again, but the signal was weak, and the map was slow to update. That's when I heard it, a soft, deliberate snap of a twig behind me. I stopped, heart pounding, and listened. Nothing, just the rain and the wind. I told myself it was probably a deer, maybe an elk, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I picked up the pace, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. The trail twisted through a stand of old-growth pines, the trunks so close together that the light barely reached the ground. I could feel my anxiety building, every sense on high alert. Then I saw it, my own boot print, half washed away by the rain. I'd somehow looped back on myself, walking in circles without realizing it. Panic flared in my chest. I forced myself to stop, take a breath, and check my compass. North. I needed to head north to reach the ridge. I cut through the trees, bushwhacking my way uphill. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through my jacket and chilling me to the bone. I stumbled over roots and rocks, my legs burning with effort. That's when I saw the first sign that I wasn't alone. A strip of red fabric tied around a branch at eye level. It looked fresh, the color bright against the dark bark. I stopped, staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I hadn't tied any markers. I hadn't seen another hiker all day. So who had left it? I kept moving, but now every step felt heavier. I started seeing more of them, bits of fabric, sometimes red, sometimes blue, tied to branches or wedged into the bark. They formed a rough path, leading deeper into the woods. I should have turned back. Every instinct told me to get out of there, to retrace my steps and find my way back to the car. But I was tired, cold, and the idea of wandering in circles all night was worse than following the markers. I pressed on, following the trail of fabric. The forest grew darker, the trees pressing in on all sides. The rain had turned to mist, swirling around my ankles as I walked. Then I heard it again, the snap of a twig, closer this time. I spun around, shining my flashlight into the trees. Nothing, just shadows and mist. I kept moving, faster now, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The markers led me to a small clearing where the ground was littered with old cans, broken bottles, and the remains of a fire pit. It looked abandoned, but not for long. I scanned the clearing, heart racing. That's when I saw the footprints, fresh, deep, leading away from the fire pit and into the trees. They weren't mine. I backed away, every nerve screaming at me to run. But before I could move, I heard a voice, a low, guttural whisper, just at the edge of hearing. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. A warning, or maybe a threat. I turned and ran, crashing through the undergrowth, not caring about the noise. Branches whipped at my face, thorns tore at my clothes. I didn't stop until I saw the faint glow of my camp lantern through the trees. I reached my tent, dove inside, and zipped it shut. I sat there in the dark, listening to the rain and the distant sound of footsteps circling the camp. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the red fabric, the footprints, the shadowy figure moving through the trees. At dawn, I packed up and left, not bothering to eat or drink. I followed my compass, ignoring the trails, pushing through the forest until I reached the road. When I finally made it back to my car, I found a strip of red fabric tied to the antenna. I still don't know who or what was out there with me that night, but I haven't hiked alone since. I've always been drawn to places that most people avoid. There's something about the silence of an abandoned forest that makes you feel like you're the only person left in the world. That's why, last spring, I decided to hike the Old Pine Hollow Preserve in upstate New York, a place that's been off limits for decades, with a reputation for being cursed. I'd read about it on a few forums, mostly warnings and ghost stories, but I never put much stock in that kind of thing. I just wanted a new challenge, somewhere I could test my limits and maybe find a little peace. I packed light, water, snacks, a flashlight, and a roll of bright orange trail tape I used to mark my path. I always remove the tape on my way back, so I don't leave a trace. The entrance to Pine Hollow was nothing more than a rusted gate, half swallowed by vines. I parked on the shoulder, checked my phone. No service, as expected, and ducked under the gate. The woods were dense, the air heavy with the smell of moss and old leaves. It was so quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat. I started marking my route, tying a strip of tape to a branch every 100 yards or so. The forest floor was soft, muffling my footsteps, and the deeper I went, the more the silence pressed in. No birds, no wind, not even the distant hum of traffic. Just me and the endless trees. About an hour in, I heard it, a low, drawn-out wail echoing through the woods. It didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. It was too human, too desperate. I froze, every hair on my arms standing up. I told myself it was just the wind, but there wasn't even a breeze. I kept moving, a little faster now, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. The wailing faded, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. I tried to focus on the trail, on the bright orange tape that marked my way back. That's when I saw the carvings. Deep gouges in the bark of a dozen trees. Strange symbols that didn't look like letters or numbers, just jagged lines and rough shapes, as if someone had been trying to send a message only they could understand. I stopped, staring at the marks, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. I turned to leave, following my trail markers back the way I'd come. But something was wrong. The tape was lower than I remembered, tied at waist height instead of shoulder height. I stopped, confused, and looked around. That's when I saw it, a cave, half hidden by brush, maybe 20 yards off the trail. I was certain it hadn't been there before. My mind raced. Had I missed it on the way in? Or had someone moved my markers, trying to lead me off the path? I didn't wait to find out. I turned and started running, tearing the tape from the branches as I passed. The forest was still dead silent, except for the sound of my own breathing and the pounding of my heart. Then the wailing started again, louder this time, closer. It echoed through the trees, chasing me as I ran. I didn't dare look back. I just kept moving, praying I was heading in the right direction. My phone buzzed, a single bar of service. I pulled up my GPS, found the location of my car, and sprinted toward it, the wailing growing fainter with every step. When I finally broke through the trees and saw my car, I nearly collapsed with relief. I jumped in, locked the doors, and didn't look back until I was miles away. I still don't know what was in those woods with me that day. Maybe it was just a hermit, or maybe something worse. All I know is I'll never ignore a warning about a cursed forest again. When I was a teenager, my house sat on the edge of a thick patch of woods, the kind that always seemed darker than it should be, even in the middle of the day. Those woods were my escape. My friends and I would sneak out there to smoke, to talk, to get away from our parents, and sometimes just to see how far we could go before we got spooked and turned back. One summer night, my friend Chester suggested we hike all the way to the reservoir on the other side of the woods. There were 5 of us, me, Chester, Rick, Jasper, and Hassan. We grabbed a few beers, a flashlight, and set off before the sun went down, cutting through the fence behind my backyard and following the muddy trail toward the water. The reservoir was huge, ringed by trees and cliffs, and we always felt like we owned the place. We hung out on the near side for a while, but eventually decided to walk the long way around to a spot we called the beach, a smooth, sandy patch on the far side where we could sit and watch the water. It was almost dark by the time we got there. The woods behind us were a wall of black, and the only sound was the gentle slap of water against the rocks. We were laughing, telling stories, when Hassan suddenly went quiet and pointed down the shoreline. At first, we thought it was just another group of kids sneaking in, but as the figure got closer, we realized he was dragging something heavy, a big, black garbage bag that thudded against the ground with every step. He stopped at the water's edge, knelt, and started working at the bag, but we couldn't see what he was doing. We were frozen, not sure if we should run or just stay quiet. Before we could decide, 3 more figures emerged from the woods, 2 dragging bags, the third carrying a kayak over his head. They moved with purpose, barely speaking, and helped load one of the bags into the kayak. We watched in horror as the man paddled out to the middle of the reservoir and dumped the bag into the water. He came back, loaded another, and did it again. The whole time, none of them looked our way, until my phone rang, loud and shrill in the silence. All 4 men snapped their heads toward us. For a split second, nobody moved. Then Rick whispered, "Run." We bolted, crashing through the brush, tripping over roots and rocks, desperate to put as much distance as possible between us and the reservoir. I could hear footsteps behind us, branches snapping, someone shouting. We reached the fence, scrambling to find the hole we'd cut, hands shaking, hearts pounding. As I helped Chester through, I heard a branch snap just a few feet behind us. We didn't stop running until we were back in my backyard, gasping for breath, too scared to even speak. We called the police, told them everything. They searched the woods and the reservoir, and a few days later, it was all over the news. 3 bodies found in the water, no suspects, no arrests. For months after, my mom swore she saw people in the woods at night, flashes of light, shadows moving between the trees. We moved out not long after, and I haven't been back since. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my phone hadn't rung, if we'd stayed quiet just a little longer. But mostly, I just try not to think about what else might be at the bottom of that reservoir, waiting to be found.